Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back to the program. This is episode 317. In the news this week, just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Pennsylvania Academy of Masonic Knowledge. They were really kind to the Masonic Roundtable, and they are probably one of the top, if not the top, premier Masonic education organizations, which is funded by a Grand Lodge. So huge kudos goes out to them. They do two symposia every year. Really cool stuff. And this year, or this time around, rather, meeting October 28th. You can read all about it, of course, on Chris Hodap's blog, freemasonryfordummies.blogspot.com. But essentially, Chris writes, twice a year, the Pennsylvania Academy of Masonic Knowledge meets in Elizabethtown, PA, usually presenting two outstanding speakers at each meeting. The Academy meetings are open to any Mason who wishes to attend. The fall 2017 meeting will take place on Saturday, October 28th in the Dyke Auditorium of the Freemasons Cultural Center on the campus of the Masonic Village in Elizabethtown. The speakers for this event are my friends and brothers Michael Pohl and John Bridegroom. Michael Pohl is the editor of the Journal of the Masonic Society. He is also a fellow and past president of the Masonic Society. If you read Masonic books or hunt them online, you will undoubtedly have come across his cornerstone book publishers. He is one of the most prolific and consistently excellent editors and publishers of both new and heritage books on Freemasonry and esotericism. Mike is a past master of Friends of Harmony Lodge number 58 and a member of the famed Etoile Polaire Lodge number 1, both in New Orleans, Louisiana. Etoile Polaire is one of just 10 or so lodges in that state permitted to work the Scottish Rite Craft degrees, which are derived from the days of their original chartering when France still owned the place, long predating the Grand Lodge of Louisiana. He's also a member of numerous appendant bodies. Michael's presentation will be The Enlightenment of Freemasonry. John Bridegroom is the art director for the Masonic Society and owns and operates the Master's Craft, which creates unique Masonic jewels, medallions, pins, and much more. Trust me, you don't have to look too hard to come across his artwork on Masonic websites or lodge decor. John is an extraordinarily active Mason, along with being a fellow Hoosier, where all the cool kids hail from, and is currently the Deputy Grand Master of the Grand Council Cryptic Masons of Indiana. He's a past master of Porter Lodge number 137 in Valparaiso, Indiana, and belongs to everything you can think of. And something tells me he's got something to do with this. Now, at this point in the article, he has a hyperlink, which takes us back to a brand new lodge that's under dispensation. If you want to check that out, you're going to want to navigate over to freemasonryfordummies.blogspot.com and click the link. But to get back to the piece, the title of his presentation, John Bridegroom's presentation, that is Freemasonry as a Hermetic Philosophy. Chris continues, if you can't make it to Elizabethtown that Saturday, have no worries. There will be a live stream of the event on YouTube, and recordings will be available following the event on the Pennsylvania Masons YouTube channel. Pennsylvania's educational program is outstanding, and other jurisdictions would benefit from similar programs. Membership in the Academy is free to all Pennsylvania Masons, and they offer a Masonic Scholars Certification program with a requirement of an extensive reading list and submission of evaluation papers. So I know that was a little bit lengthy for our news that we usually put out, but I did want to mention it because, again, what a great program that they put together. The first actual education piece I have for this week was sent to me via email from one Billy Hosler. That's right, Worshipful Brother Bill Hosler, who went ahead and sent this paper over to me, and only saying, great paper, might be good for the show. I very much agree. I think it's a wonderful paper, and I'd love to go into that right now. So let's dive in. Why G? By Brother Joel Newman. So I always wondered, why G? When asked by non-Masons what the G means between the square and compasses, this is actually quite simple and elementary answer with slight differences and variations depending on who you ask, of course, but you would probably say something like the G represents God, or the great architect of the universe, or the grand geometrician of the universe. I'm sure we can all agree that Freemasonry is based on very fundamental and rudimentary principles, but what we can also agree on, that nothing in Freemasonry is simple. Everything has a foundation. But that foundation is usually supporting something much more beautiful and complex. I would like to investigate the letter G in greater detail and possibly shed some light on its more profound and esoteric relevance to Freemasonry. I first want to point out that I don't intend to come to any substantial conclusion as to the true meaning of the letter G. I always like to take a Socratic approach to these types of subjects. They are subjective, and you can choose to accept or reject the information that I provide here. Ultimately, as in most of Freemasonry, it is whatever it means for you, and I will leave it up to you as individuals to identify any Masonic relevance that resonates for you. So first, we should explore exactly where the letter G comes from. Let us start with the letter Gimel. It is the third letter, fifth in spelling order, of the Semitic Abjads, or Semitic being the family of languages and Abjad being the type of written system. The Hebrew Gimel is a variant of its original Phoenician, and from it we also get the Greek Gamma, the Latin G and C, and the Cyrillic. I'm going to try my best not to get too far off the original topic. Although it is speculated that the word Gimel is derived from the word Gamel, meaning camel, I am more interested in the fact that the shape of the letter looks like a man in motion. In Freemasonry, there is much to mention of Jacob's ladder. So this hit home for me when I thought back to a conversation I had with a fellow brother Mason on his perspective of Jacob's ladder, and how to him it represents the base of the spine and its ascension to the pineal gland, or as Descartes would call it, the seat of the soul. The Hebrew word gomel, which we relate to Gimel, means benefactor. The letter G, which comes after, is delay, or dal, which means weak. This is the great benefactor walking towards the weak. From this, we learn that we should give to those less fortunate and help those in need. Faith, hope, and charity. In the mystical teachings, due to Gimel being the third letter in Hebrew alphabet, represents stability and is usually related to the three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all three of which are mentioned in Masonic ritual. There is a very important lesson here that is mentioned throughout the 3 degrees, and I hope you have put that together yourself. The Greek gamma, like Gimel, is the same word as camel. When the Romans adopted gamma from the Greeks, however, they made a significant change. Unlike the Greeks, the Romans used the letter gamma to indicate the sound K, as in compare, and the sound of G, as in go. Not only that, the Romans changed the shape of the letter, softening the sharp angle of the gamma to a curve. The resultant shape looked very similar to our modern English C, but having one letter represent two very different sounds grew problematic. Ultimately, the Romans developed a graphic differentiation for the two sounds. The K sound remained with the C shape, while a bar was added to the bottom edge of the letter to indicate the G sound, as in got. The result was the modern G, placing it 7th in alphabetical order. Now, I will be the first to admit that I don't give a lot of validity to numerology. The term grasping at straws comes to mind only because I never see any substantial evidence that it is relevant. Freemasonry is slowly changing that for me, though, especially in this case. The letter G has taken a bit of a journey during its transformation. I want to highlight some key points that I personally feel are important, and then leave the rest to you, to your own interpretations. In Hebrew, it is the third letter in the alphabetic order. It is the 5th letter in spelling order, and was later adopted as the 7th letter in the Latin alphabet. Gimel can be loosely translated to mean benefactor. Gimel represents stability and is related in the mystic teachings to the 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The symbol of Gimel represents a man in motion with emphasis on the base of the spine to the head. It is important to point out that the Greek gamma, as it is where the Latin G is derived from. For those of you already familiar with this topic, or fellow linguists, you can see that there is information that has been left out. I wanted to keep this brief enough to be appropriate for Sunday morning read. I more intend to encourage research rather than educate, so I invite you to investigate this topic a little further, maybe even find some information that I didn't. Thank you, brethren, and enjoy. Postscript. Something else I found interesting that I will leave for your own perusal. Since we are talking about the Roman/Latin alphabet, I just want to point something out with the Roman numerals. As we have seen in the genesis of the letter G, it had a numerical value of 3. I think it goes without saying that the number 3 is very prominent in Masonic teachings and ritual. Now look at the Roman numeral for 3 eyes. It looks like an ideogram for the 3 pillars of Freemasonry. Maybe purely coincidental, or maybe not. I will leave you with that to decide. Questions or comments, please email wanderson25 at cogeco.ca. Their mailing address, Sunday Masonic Paper, 825 Milford Drive, Kingston, Ontario, K7P1A8, Canada. And that's it for that piece. I think what's interesting, if you did follow along, it was difficult to follow along. So if your mind is reeling or you needed to listen to that over again, don't worry. I had to read it 3 or 4 times to get it myself. However, you will notice the 3, the 5, and the 7 repeatedly coming up. It's interesting. I'll leave it at that. Now, before we get into the next piece, I just wanted to throw a huge thanks out there to a lot of the fellas on social media who sent me their table lodge and their festive board scripts. I was thinking about a festive board here in the state of Illinois, and what occurred to me when a brother recently asked if we had ritual for that was prescribed specifically for a festive board, not a table lodge, because they are 2 different things. Well, apparently the Illinois Code Book or the Illinois Ritual refers to them both in the same document as if they are the same thing. They are completely different, and I guess a lot of people don't know about the festive board or the table lodge, but suffice to say that the table lodge is a celebration. It's a lodge, a meeting that takes place over dinner. The charter is there. They open, they collect a pass, they have some toasts. It's pretty fun. A festive board usually contains speakers, toasts, but the lodge is not open, and in fact, is open to anybody to attend, spouses, prospective members, and usually are held on the solstices to celebrate one of the St. John's days. So thanks to the brothers who went ahead and shot those rituals over to me. I really do appreciate that. The next piece I have for this week is somewhat anecdotal. However, I did want to cover this because as a former member of the Scottish Rite Northern jurisdiction, I was a person who really wanted to know more about the degrees. I wanted to learn more about the espoused teachings of the degrees, and in such, I couldn't find anything because, well, the Northern jurisdiction just doesn't have any books published. There was a guide that was published several years ago in the 1980s, which is pretty dry, not that great. Another attempt was made later by Trexler from the Northern jurisdiction. He wrote a brief history of the different degrees, which I guess they took down after 4 months or so, which you can still find on archive.org. It's a history of the Northern jurisdiction degrees. It talks about the different changes they made and what it was originally and what it is now. And when I say now, I mean, I guess like 2008 when that was published. The degrees have still changed and gone through several iterations since then, but we were left with a gaping hole that is essentially a complete lack of history for the degrees in the Northern jurisdiction, and not only a lack of history on it, a lack of an explanation of anything that goes on in those degrees. There's no real commentary. It's very superficial and surface level stuff, but there has to be stuff that's deeper, right? So recently I went ahead and I bought the Franken manuscript, which is a wonderful, wonderful book that was put together by the Northern jurisdiction. Big kudos goes out to them for doing this book. It's literally the size of a cinder block. It weighs about the same. I have no plans to jump into it at this time. It is a large tome, and I just don't have a desire to hop into it just yet. However, if you want to know more about the Scottish Rite in the Northern jurisdiction, you're left to read certain things, like maybe Committed to the Flames, which is a wonderful book by De Hoyos and Morris. They wrote together, explaining some of what happened up here in the 15 states. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a book called The Masonic Pageant, Guide to the Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite Northern Masonic Jurisdiction Degrees, and our buddy Chris wrote the foreword. It's a pretty sweet book, and I'd like to just read you his post about that book that he published a little while back. Well, looky what Al, our friendly UPS man, delivered today, along with his usual daily present of a milk bone biscuit for Wiley. After more than a century of being largely ignored in print, Scottish Rite Freemasons in the Northern Masonic jurisdiction of the United States can at last rejoice. After a year and a half of long and twisted path to publication, the Masonic Pageant, the Scottish Rite, Degrees of the Supreme Council, Northern Jurisdiction by illustrious brother Frank Conway, 33rd degree, is finally being shipped by Cornerstone Publishing and can be ordered directly from the publisher. From the website, the Masonic Pageant is clearly written and easy to understand explanation information of the Scottish Rite degrees as worked by the Supreme Council 33rd degree Northern Masonic Jurisdiction. Frank Conway, PhD, 33rd degree MSA, provides a long-needed and extremely valuable resource to all Scottish Rite Masons of the Northern Jurisdiction. This is a must-have book for all NMJ, Scottish Rite Masons, and bodies of the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction. Dr. Frank Conway has done a great service for Scottish Rite Freemasons with this book. His volume is far more than just a simple, up-to-date guide to the degrees of the Northern Jurisdiction. Each chapter contains a synopsis of the stage presentation of the degrees itself, along with a brief description of its counterpart in the Southern Jurisdiction. But it is in the center of each chapter where you will find the heart and soul of this work. The historic origins, symbols, and myths behind each degree are thoroughly explored, whether it's a story based largely on biblical accounts, medieval sources, or more recent events. Conway draws upon the vast wealth of knowledge covering more than 2,500 years of history and legends that have gone into the creation of these degrees, and he provides much in the way of a background and context. The eager brother will find much here to enlighten his journey through the degrees. Freemasonry encourages its members to engage in a search for light, knowledge, and understanding, and the search requires access to accurate information. The Masonic Pageant provides the searcher with up-to-date information on the Scottish Rite degrees in the Northern Jurisdiction. It is a boon to all who seek to understand the complex symbolism and ritual themes of these degrees. Some of these are quotes right off the book. That last one was from Brent S. Morrison. Before that was one by Chris Hodap, actually. The last serious attempt to publish a guidebook to the Northern Jurisdiction degrees was the continuously revised book of the Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite by Charles T. McClanahan, last released in 1907. In the ensuing 110 years, the Northern Jurisdiction, or the NMJ, members have been left in the dark regarding the background, symbolism, history, and any other information about the degrees that make up their own distinctive system of rituals that differ completely from the Southern Jurisdiction counterpart and the rest of the world. Illustrious Brother Conway has finally addressed this gaping lack of access to knowledge and performed an incalculable service to more than 200,000 members of the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction who have been starved for information for so long, and to the rest of the world that knows almost nothing of the differences. In all honesty and sincerity, this book should be adopted by each and every NMJ Valley and placed in the hands of every single new sublime prince of the royal secret on the day the degree is conferred, as well as offered to existing members at every stated meeting. It's that invaluable and well written. The book is 320 pages long and the list price is $30 plus shipping. It's well worth the investment. Today the website still shows a reduced pre-order price of $26.95. I'm going to break in here really quick. It does not have that link anymore for that price. Back to the article. But it could pop up at its regular $29.95 list price at any second, so he who hesitates is out 3 smackers. And no, as some have wryly suggested, it's not in loose leaf format for the regular revision. Please note, in full disclosure, I was deeply honored to be asked to pre-read and write the foreword to the book, and I did so because I felt it was such a vital work that needed to be actively supported. But it is Frank Conway who has done the very heavy lifting of authoring this incredible resource, and the sole credit belongs to him and to Michael Pohl at Cornerstone Publishing for bringing it to life. So there you have it, some really interesting information about that. If you think about it, I mean, the last time something was published was like over 100 years ago. People were born, joined Masonry, joined the Scottish Rite, received a 33rd degree, and died and never saw a book about this. How insane is that? I can't even wrap my mind around it. In any case, I hope people buy this book up because I want it to prove that we want education. Now, who knows what the Scottish Rite's got planned in the future? They say they've got some new plans. I'm keeping an eye on it, not as a member. Again, I had demitted from the Northern Jurisdiction. I only hold a membership in the Southern Jurisdiction as of now. The Southern Jurisdiction has the education, and that's what I'm into. So next, we're going to dive right into this week's Masonic Minute with illustrious brother Stephen L. Harrison.
Although a crime of passion, by now it would have faded forgotten into history, but for the impassioned and eloquent words of a Freemason. The facts of the case were never in doubt. The killer admitted firing his gun in anger and leaving the body where it fell. The morning after the crime, the killer's neighbor, Charles Burden, found the body. Enraged, he began a year-long battle to bring Leonidas Hornsby to justice for killing Old Drum, Burden's hunting dog. Leonidas Hornsby was an angry man. Something was killing his sheep, and he wanted it stopped. Any of the predatory wildlife in the area around his Kingsville, Missouri farm could have killed the sheep, but for some reason Hornsby was certain dogs were responsible. "I've had it," Hornsby told a neighbor. "I'm going to kill the next dog I see on my property." Then, on the evening of October 28, 1869, Hornsby found Old Drum wandering on his farm and made good on his promise. Hornsby's brother-in-law, Charles Burden, lived on the adjoining farm. On occasion, Burden and Hornsby had gone hunting together with Old Drum, and Hornsby had even called him one of the best hunting dogs I have ever seen. That October evening, all of Burden's dogs came home except one, Old Drum. The next morning, Burden went in search of his favorite hunting dog and discovered the body. Hornsby never denied shooting the dog, and Burden did the only thing he could in order to gain some degree of justice. He sued Hornsby for damages. The trial turned into one of the most convoluted circuses in Missouri legal history. Through the original trial and 3 appeals, the dispute finally reached the Missouri Supreme Court on September 23, 1870. Along the way, the case attracted a bevy of high-profile lawyers, including David Nation, husband of temperance zealot Carrie Nation, and Brother Thomas Crittenden, a future Missouri governor whose dead or alive reward led to the killing of Jesse James. Burden's attorney throughout was Brother George Graham Vest, a member of a lodge in Frankfort, Kentucky, and also a member of the York Rite in Sedalia, Missouri. Vest, a future U.S. Senator from Missouri, easily got Hornsby to admit he did not see Old Drum doing any harm to his property, nor was he certain it was dogs that were killing his sheep. Although the crime was vicious, it was nonetheless a misdemeanor. Its record was destined to fade unnoticed into history until Brother Vest stood for his closing argument. His inspired words now stand as legendary to dog lovers and have been cast in bronze on monuments to those faithful companions. What he said was so powerful that acclaimed author William Safire said it was one of the greatest speeches of the millennium. Vest's oratory, said Safire, ranks with that of Patrick Henry, Abraham Lincoln, and maybe God. Laying the facts and arguments of the case aside, Vest addressed the jury. He said, "The one absolutely unselfish friend that man can have, the one that never deserts him, and the one that never proves ungrateful or treacherous is his dog. He guards the sleep of his pauper master as if he were a prince. When all other friends desert, he remains. And when the last scene of all comes, and death takes the master in its embrace, and his body is laid away in the cold ground, no matter if all other friends pursue their way, there by his graveside will the noble dog be found, his head between his paws, his eyes sad but open in alert watchfulness, faithful and true, even to death." History records that when Brother Vest returned to his seat, there was not a dry eye in the courtroom. The Supreme Court of Missouri later upheld the jury's verdict. Leonidas Hornsby was guilty of the killing of Old Drum and was to pay Charles Burden damages amounting to the sum of $50, the maximum amount allowable. In 1958, the Chamber of Commerce, with the backing from dog lovers across the country, erected a monument to Old Drum on the Johnson County Courthouse lawn in Warrensburg, Missouri, near the site of the crime. It pays tribute to Old Drum and George Graham Vest, a backwoods Missouri lawyer and Freemason who was the first person ever to call a dog man's best friend. For the Whence Came You podcast, this is Steve Harrison with the Masonic Minute.
Huge thanks to Brother Stephen L. Harrison for giving us that amazing piece as usual. There's a lot of work that goes into that, and I just can't thank you enough for all that you do for this program and for the light you are blasting out into the interwebs for us, especially through this program and on your YouTube channel. It's just fantastic. So thanks again, Brother Steve. If you like this kind of thing, please go to our website, WCYpodcast.com, click on the bookstore, and you will find links to all of Brother Stephen L. Harrison's books, whether that's in print form or Kindle. You can pick them up at very reasonable prices, and they're awesome books, so you have no excuse. Awesome content at awesome prices. And speaking about awesome content, does this show have awesome content? If you think so, please consider supporting this program with a donation through our PayPal account. You can do that right on our website, WCYpodcast.com. Go ahead and click on the Support the Show tab, and then there's a drop down. So you can actually make a one-time donation, or you can set up recurring donations and become a fellow, a member, or a producer of the program. In addition to that, we also have our lapel pins, which come in a variety of little things that we like as Masons, whether that's a lapel pin or cufflinks or a tie bar or a money clip. We have those available for you as well, and all the dollars from those go right back into this program and bringing it all together and maintaining it so that every episode is always available to you at any time forever, even though iTunes only gives us 300 episodes. So if you want any of the 17 episodes that came before this one, you're going to have to go to WCYpodcast.com, or you can head on over to our Libsyn page where you can find everything there as well. Or you can just follow us on the RSS feed. Links to all of that is on our website at WCYpodcast.com. And lastly, before we close out this week, I want to tell everybody that maybe I might be getting back into Masonic Radio Theater. We might put a new episode out. I'm starting to get a little bit more time to record now and getting back in the swing of things. Perhaps something could happen. I don't want to get all your hopes up, but there's a glimmer down the road, and it might happen. We really want to finish up at least the Lodge of Gold series, which was the series I wanted to do from the beginning, and shame on me for putting out one episode and not putting the other two out. So with that, I hope you guys had a fantastic week last week, and I hope you have an amazing week coming up, and I'll talk to you all next week. So until then, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.